Hey everybody, welcome to the Blue Chip Podcast by fans for fans. This is your host Cody Potter. How y'all doing today? So we're going to get into some of these offensive guys that we have accumulated through this draft, the 2026 class. I guess we'll start here with Antonio Williams. So with Antonio Williams, man, this is a guy that is honestly ready to go. A lot of people were talking about, well, we picked another slot receiver, blah blah blah. Didn't necessarily get the big X Z Z type. This is a guy that can win inside and out. I mean, it's very this is not the type of pick that this team has made in the past couple of years. We've seen Jalen Lane be a pick that was a special teams ace kind of player. We needed a punt returner. It had been a thorn in our side. Last year's class, I didn't think was necessarily the same value that you were going to get at the wide receiver position at that point when we took Jalen Lane. Maybe there were some better players at other positions, but they very very much like Jalen Lane, the player. I think there is some developmental upside with him long term as far as winning in the deep seams and things like that from the slot. Some of this is what you're seeing from Antonio Williams right here, catching it short on screen game, doing things out wide. Antonio Williams brings you that too. Luke McCaffrey the year before that, that was a guy that played quarterback, needed a lot of developmental upside and a lot of developmental time. I think there is still a place for Luke McCaffrey on this team to compete. Maybe he's competing outside with Brandon Ayuk. I'm sure he's still going to get reps from the slot. We know that he can win. He has, some ability to separate and things like that with his route nuance and things like that. But to Antonio Williams, man, this is a guy, man, that even with, Bryant Wesco Jr. last year with Clemson playing more inside, he really cleaned up the drops, still had the explosive, ability, didn't have necessarily a ton of explosive catches, or plays like he did the year before when he was lining up predominantly outside. But there are a lot of factors that go into that, man. Like when I watched Cade Klubnik last year, plenty of times where I'm like, get him the ball. Forcing the ball, other players, forcing the ball in other situations, not getting in rhythm as an offense collectively. Antonio Williams is a guy that I think can start right away on this team, whether it be in slot, whether it's, I know he can play outside. I know he can win vertically like that too from outside of the hashes. You could talk about the route tree and things like that he's done in his time in Clemson. Definitely a lot of screen games, a lot of quick ins, quick outs. Yards after the catch and things like that, which he's going to offer you. You're going to see plenty of that on his highlight reel behind me and everything like that. But Antonio Williams is one of them guys that I think is going to really, really thrive in this offense, especially with the play action element, which I'm going to get into that when I highlight the next player. Because I think this next player that we're going to talk about is going to give you a ton of upside in that department. Our 6th round pick, Kaytron Allen, man, this dude can play, man. This dude is a hell of a football player, and he's a guy that I'm very, very excited for, man. Like, everybody can talk about that, Montgomery type, for the Lions. Penn State did everything that they could to get Nicholas Singleton, to be their, primary starting back, and time and time again, Kaytron Allen outproduced him. Having the big back, man, running a ton in the Big Ten against NFL, defenses with a ton of NFL talent and things like that, playing in the heavy box, the success that he had in heavy box, the patience, the run vision, the ball, yards after contact, the ball carrier, the balance, through contact, man. Like, this dude has all the traits, man. He might not be, that 60 yards and next thing kind of running back or things like that, man, but just a guy that runs through contacts, always getting forward progress, always getting plus level yards, favorable down in distances, man. And when these defenses start to crowd up and give you a heavy box with this guy in there, man, play action to a guy like Antonio Williams, to a guy like Terry McLaurin, who I know they're both going to be out there blocking. They both put effort into the blocking department. I was very, very much impressed with everything that I've seen from Antonio Williams for a guy that's a $187, 190 pounds. He is a good blocker, man. The play action is going to be very, very heavily involved. You're going to see more tight end sets and more tight end involvement than I think we've seen over the last couple of years. It is up to Jaden Daniels to basically, kind of grow outside of that comfort zone that he already has. The things that Antonio Williams and Terry McLaurin can do, and we know they can specialize in over the top vertically and things like that. Like, we know that we know that Jaden Daniels can hit those plays. Like we know everything that Jaden Daniels is made up of, built from, every skill set that he has. He can thrive in these certain situations and all these things. So I'm very, very excited to see what Katron Allen brings to this offense, man. I think he's going to be getting a lot of touches, man. I like Jerome Ford, kind of a very similar skill set. Both of them can catch the ball out of the backfield. I just think Katron Allen is one of them dudes, man. Like he just makes plays that are not necessarily always available to be made before he makes them. Like he runs through contacts, man, runs through arm tackles, gets first downs. I mean, it's not going to be the prettiest highlight reel when you're watching this guy, but just a team like this is the type of dude that when your defense is, when your offense is sustaining drives and, you're carrying a lead and your team can, start to get after their quarterback, which that was a predominant focus, man. Like when I tell you like everything that we did in the draft, the last couple of years, it's been very, 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 very theme based. Its first year was quarterback, get the quarterback room figured out with Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota. Second year, get the offensive line, get that room, solidified as best they could. Laramie Tunsil, Josh Connerly, having Sam Cosmi held over, another year with Tyler Biotish, things like that. And then, moving to Nick Allegretti, who they said was really actually the guy making a lot of calls and things like that when he was on the field. And then, when Allegretti was no longer starting because of Chris Paul, some of the communicational issues showed up, and that's a big thing that they were talking about, trying to get cleaned up this offseason. So, and then you made a pick at center. Doesn't necessarily fit the zone blocking scheme, ideally as far as pulling your center, but having that center be the backside block, at a certain point when you pull your guard and you pull your tackle, and now your center is your backside blocker. That is very much something that Govlin can do. So I'm very, very excited to see this run game. Katron Allen coming from the zone blocking scheme, he's going to be very versatile in this. I think Bill Jacory Krosky-Merritt has a lot to learn as far as, the nuances of knowing, how to keep his route depth, very consistent as far as being a receiver, man. Katron Allen is a guy that can do those things. Rashad White is a guy that can do those things. Jerome Ford is a guy that can do those things, man. And then we saw what Jeremy McNichols has done as a as a pass catcher out of the backfield, man. He's made some really, really big key plays both years for us in the last, 2 seasons. So that's something that I really feel like is going to benefit Bill this offseason, just being able to have those veterans, having these guys that all thrive in this, in these two areas as far as the pass blocking and, the receiving out of the backfield nuances that these guys excel in. So it's only going to be something positive for Bill to kind of emulate what they're doing and kind of pay attention to it, work through his own deficiencies in that department, which I'm sure he's doing all season, trying to work on these things. But then, also taking care of the ball and things like that he needs to do, because Katron Allen does not fumble that ball. I mean, every snap that he played in college, he never put the ball on the ground. So, I mean, that's you're talking about a guy who's going to come in day one and I think impact this roster more so than maybe anybody thinks. And for a 6th-round player, man, to be able to get another running back in the later rounds of the draft that can come in here and have a really, really big impact. Like I said, man, Nicholas Singleton has all the talent in the world, man. If you're going to build a running back in the lab, Nick Singleton has all the height, weight, speed, everything like that. But no matter what they wanted to do in Penn State, it was always Katron Allen that continued to just carry the load, be the bell cow, never got negative plays, always saw the hole, always made something out of nothing when it wasn't there, and you just could not take this guy off the field. And again, running into big, heavy sets, running into, 8-man fronts and all that because of the deficiencies from the quarterback play or the quarterback being injured and things like that were going on over there at Penn State, man. Katron Allen is a guy that can excel and, win in this league. And I'm very, very excited for what this boy has to offer for this team. So moving forward, man, I'm very, very excited about this pick. Everybody else should be. I think this is going to be a guy that's going to see a lot more volume of carries, for this team than maybe anybody really, really ideally thinks he's, going to get coming out, ideally right now. But I really think this dude's going to compete and probably be our early down back by the time the season gets here or by week 3, week 4. And I mean, this is the type of guy that your defense is going to love. Sustaining drives, second and fives, second and fours, third and ones, things like that, man. Like we've seen Jaden Daniels be able to convert 3rd and 12s and 3rd and 15s and all these magical things that Jaden Daniels has done. Well, this is taking some of the some of the load off of Jaden Daniels from just having to be Superman all the time, man. And I'm really, really excited to see where this goes with Katron Allen. Him and Antonio Williams are both guys that I think are going to have not just an early impact on this team by, the first 4, 5, 6 weeks of the season, but I think Antonio Williams complements what Terry McLaurin does very, very well. We all know that Brandon Ayuk is out there still, that there's a more than likely logical destination for him is here. I don't see another team trading. He doesn't seem to be interested in that, so he kind of does hold the cards, even though he doesn't have no trade clause or anything like that. So again, man, like if your wide receiver room is going to be comprised of Antonio Williams. You have Dammy Brown, who can definitely win, vertically in the slot, can win vertically outside, and give you, maybe a couple, impacts every few games. We know that Dammy Brown can give you that. I don't know what Van Jefferson is, as far as this point. He's a very, very good route runner. He's definitely a guy that I would want in the room. He's much better than Chris Moore and some of the guys that you were relying on last year. And then you've got Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane that can continue to develop. But I think Antonio Williams and his skill set, man, and some of the nuances and route running and refinement that he has coming out of college, I think that's going to be a positive impact for them guys as well. Because as we see, man, injuries happen in the NFL. And if they do happen, at least this year, the wide receiver room has been completely reworked. The defensive end, room has been completely reworked. And that's what's going to get me into this player right here, Joshua Josephs. So factoring in, everything, as far as from a production standpoint, from a measurable standpoint, let's be real. He's a 5th round player. So, you've signed Kayvon Chason, you've signed Chris Amenahu, you signed Adafe Owe. The ceiling for these guys is extremely, extremely high. And then you're adding in a Joshua Josephs, who is another guy who, realistically, when you look at the traits, you look at the talent, you look at the skill set, you look at the arms, like when you watch him win, like you can see the burst, you see the power in the hands, you see, he can use his hands and pull guys off of him. Like even when offensive linemen do get into his body, he has powerful hands to get their hands off of him. Consistency is something that you're gonna, need to see a lot more of, but you do see him win in the SEC. Where do a lot of offensive linemen come from in, the National Football League, the Big Ten, SEC, all the time? So, realistically, it's not that he hasn't gone up against premier talent. For whatever reason, the Tennessee Volunteers, whether it was, Pierce last year, this guy just could not sustain, a viable role long-term on that field. And you never know what was going on really, really behind the scenes. We heard a lot of reports that a lot of teammates didn't like Pierce. Maybe he felt like he earned more playing time than, he was necessarily getting. He is a guy that can set the edge in the run, which is something that, and then, look at that. You see that spin move. A guy that can do these things is, that's an elite level skill set right there. An elite level skill set. Doesn't necessarily get the sack, but he completely blew up that play. Guys that can do these things do not go in the 5th round, and I did not have a 5th round grade on this guy. I really thought this guy was going to go, mid-late round 3 at kind of the tail end, early round 4 at the latest, and then next thing you know, he's available, to you in the early 5th round, and it's dude, you never want to project a player. You never want to comp a player to somebody who's done it, when realistically the odds tell you, time and time again that he's not going to be that guy, but when I'm talking about the wingspan, the 35-inch wingspan, you're talking about Max Crosby measurables as far as that go. He's not as tall as Max Crosby, but he has the very same get off that, early Max Crosby had coming out of college and things like that. So again, it's maybe have a little bit of, immaturity and things like that that's keeping him off the field, not consistently working. Well, it's the NFL now, man. There's nowhere for you to go but out or up. And, it really is not for long. So again, a guy that can set the edge in the run game, a guy that has these developmental traits, has the toolbox that he has, man. Realistically, there's 2 things that you get in the 5th round when it comes to edge. And a lot of these positions, it's either you get a guy that doesn't have the elite level markers as far as the measurable standpoint, or you get guys with a higher RAS score that maybe don't have the consistency in production. And this is one of them players with as far as the consistency in production. But then when you watch this guy win, you watch the pressures that he does have, the pressures that he creates, the pressure rate percentage for the amount of snaps that he has. People talk about Arvell Reese, and I'm not comping this dude to Arvell Reese. What I am saying is Arvell Reese coming off of that off-ball linebacker position, having about 90 pass rush snaps, and then having a 19% pressure rate in those 90-some snaps. So yes, it is a low volume, so maybe you do get a little bit of higher clip than a guy who's rushing 178 times over the course of the season, who has a 16 to 17% pressure rate, which is probably more top end as far as that many pass rushing snaps to getting that type of pressure rate. That would still be very, very elite. So having a 19% pass rush win rate like Arvell Reese did under 90 snaps of pass rushing, that was where the projection came from for Arvell Reese, and that's what I'm talking about with this guy right here. The amount of pressures, the pass rush wins, and things like that. So maybe you only got 3 sacks a year, collectively from this guy as far as the actual snaps and the play time that he actually received at his time in Tennessee. But when you watch the tape, you watch the skill set, you see the skill set, you see the markers, you see the disruption, you see the willingness in the run game. This is a guy that does not have to play this year one, but he's also in a room that's going to be full of guys, and Leo Chenal is going to be playing some at the edge too. Leo Chenal is brought in as an off-ball linebacker. He is also a guy who splits time as a defensive end, rushes from the edge rushing position because he has that type of physical makeup, that type of skill set. So again, every one of these guys brings a different trait to you, and they all have juice. They all have, get off, and they all have a certain skill set. You get this guy into that room and he buys in and he starts to click, and then you have multiple guys and multiple variations of rushing. You're stunning your defensive tackles, you're stunning your defensive ends, and everything's coming from all sorts of different ways. When you had 7 or 8 guys in the box and you drop 2 or 3 of them into coverage, but all of a sudden they're stunning in front of you, man. It's a lot of eye candy for an offensive line, and you have a lot of similar skill sets, man. It's not necessarily that anybody on this team is going to have 12 to 15 sacks. I don't know if we have that guy necessarily when I look around the room. If you look at, Odafe Owe and Kayvon Chason, you would say those are your most likely to be able to be in that marker. Then again, does Dorrance Armstrong come back healthy and look more like he looked last year, where he was very much on pace to be a 14, 15 sack a year, sack guy for the whole collection of the season, having 7 sacks, 7.5 sacks, within the first 5-6 weeks. I mean, he was very much on pace for a very, very good season as far as sacks. I don't think he would have sustained that, that same pressure rate over the course of the season, the way that teams were going to start keying on him. But 7.5 sacks in that amount of time, adding in an Odafe Owe across from him and a Kayvon Chason, and then the different variations of exotic type of rushes that we're going to be deploying this year. I very, very much see a lot of reason for hope for this team. There's going to be a lot of things, like I said, man. There's a lot of things that are going to look a lot more similar to what we've typically ran. They'll still do a lot of the zone read and a lot of things with Jaden Daniels because he's good at it. He's comfortable with it, man. But when you don't have to have that be your primary, you're not constantly running out of the pistol. You're running out of I form or just typical, more standard sets, and then the play action starts to figure into it, man. And you have Jaden Daniels, kind of moving on the boot, throwing on the run, out of a play action, man, where the defensive line kind of crashed down because they haven't been able, successfully stopping Katron Allen on early downs and things like that. And now you got Jaden Daniels throwing over top the back door, of a linebacker that necessarily wasn't in the right place for Chig Okonkwo and Antonio Williams, who were very, very much going to thrive in this type of system, in this type of role, with a quarterback that knows how to hit it. Now, these are the things that he has to work on, the short and intermediate, passes, being a little bit more accurate with these things. I'm sure that he has been in the lab all offseason working on those things. We already know what Jaden Daniels is outside of the hashes and down the field. He's absolutely special. These are the factors, and this is the time of his career where you really, really need to start pounding these type of nuances into his game, having him comfortable booting out, after, faking a handoff to a running back, or making, handing the ball off to the running back and still booting it out and giving that defense something to look at in that, because they have to respect Jaden Daniels' legs as well. It's just another way to deploy this guy, and then keep the linebackers and keep the defensive line and keep the edges and keep the safeties off balance. You want to spy this dude. He's going to throw that ball right over the top of you, man. If you want to continue to spy him with more of a traditional set, more West Coast kind of flavor, kind of like dialed into what this team is going to be doing. So again, man, I'm very, very excited for the additions that we have. I know Antonio Williams can come in day one and play meaningful reps on this team. You know what you're getting, man. This is not a project player. And then, like I said, the addition of Katron Allen and that power game, just being able to thump these defenses, man, and start bringing heavy boxes in, and then you can start gashing them over the top with Jaden Daniels and play action looks. Dude, you incorporate this to what this team has already done and Blau has worked under, Cliff Kingsbury. The things that Jaden Daniels is already comfortable with, those things aren't going away. They're just not going to be the majority of what we do. And adding these other nuances is only going to add to what those things are when they are more of an exotic look, because these teams are already going to be getting gashed in a more traditional style offense, and the defense is going to be getting weared at. They're going to have to bring their lunch pail to work every day, man. Tackling Katron Allen is a load, and he's done it against the Big Ten defenses, man. He's done it in big games, done it in the playoffs, like Notre Dame and teams like that, teams that have guys that are going to the NFL constantly, year after year. Penn State, he practiced against Abdul Carter. He's practiced against, all these guys, man. So trust me, dude, Katron Allen is going to be a very, very impactful football player for this team year one and going forward, man. I don't really know how the running back room necessarily shapes out, but the additions that you've made in this running back room, man, the fact that this wide receiver room, especially with the Brandon Ayuk addition, whenever that does happen, if it does happen, or maybe they sign a Keenan Allen type, or a Rashad Jennings type, whatever it is, I'm sure there's one more addition to be made to that wide receiver room as far as a veteran piece. This wide receiver room is completely different from the wide receiver room that they inherited. The edge rusher room is completely different from the room that they have inherited. The defensive tackle room has been completely almost reworked outside of Deron Payne and his consistent presence that he gives you in the running game and pass rushing department. Now there's guys actually around Deron Payne that Deron Payne can start winning when he's attacking instead of getting all the double teams and things like that. If they're going to double team Deron Payne, Dafe Owe and Caleb Von Chason can win one-on-ones, man. So, that's going to be a real big problem, man. You're going to have to start picking and choosing, and it's not just them. It's the addition of Sonny Styles. Again, we've gone this whole episode without even talking about Sonny Styles and really Leo Chenal and what he can bring from the interior, linebacker position, not just based off of what I was already highlighting about him being able to play, outside edge rusher and things like that, and then factor in Frankie Louvu, the things that he gives you more dynamically from the jack linebacker position and things like that. Mikey Samerstill coming on blitzes, something that we have definitely not, utilized enough of his skill sets as far as what he can bring you. I know we've done it with the safeties and things like that. They've definitely tried it, Will Harris and, Jeremy Chin and things like that. But Mikey Samerstill is a guy that can come off the edge and blitz and do things like that. He's very, very timely with that. He's very, very good at it. And he's a playmaker in his own right. Now you start to get this pressure. Now these edge rushers start to get pressure home. And these guys are rushing not just from inside, but outside, inside, and out. And stunning and exotic blitzes, and you got Sonny Styles, coming on some plays, or Leo Chenal coming in some plays, and you got these guys dropping back. You got, Sonny Styles or Leo Chenal in coverage, which is something that we've really, really sucked at last year. Honestly, the last 2 years we've sucked at it from the linebacker position, but the year before we had Jeremy Chin, who very, very much thrived as far as, the tight ends gashing us. That was the first year in a long time that I remember tight ends not consistently, beating us game after game after game after game. Not saying we didn't have some games where some did. There's really good tight end play in the league. So there's definitely games where Jeremy Chin didn't have his necessarily best coverage game against a tight end, but at a consistent rate, week after week after week, he was giving you much better, production against tight ends in coverage than we had ever had. So again, and you kind of lost a lot of that last year, and we saw what it was when it was our linebackers having to make up for it. When Will Harris was down, Jeremy Reeves wasn't necessarily as good as far as that in the nuances of that part of his game, because he's never even been a strong safety, a starting safety in this league. He's always been a really, really good special teams ace. And for everything that Jeremy Reeves is, he very, very much improved over the course of the season. So now you feel even more comfortable with him having to step in and play more serviceable reps. You didn't really bring a ton into the cornerback room. You didn't really bring a ton into the safety room. But Nick Cross can play football, man, and that dude can cover tight ends just like Jeremy Chin. Like, that guy is almost a replacement for what Jeremy Chin offered you, minus about maybe 2 inches and about 5-10 pounds. But I think he's a little bit more consistent player, and I think he's a little bit better in the coverage aspect as far as what Jeremy Chin offered you as well. So again, I think you're going to improve and see the improvements in that. So now it's not just Nick Cross, solely playing that, dependency on, he's our guy that can cover tight ends. He's got to be the one to do it. Well, Sonny Styles can do it. Leo Chenal can do it. Again, now you start to mix these variations of, man, we're looking like we're bringing the house on this play, and the next thing you know, it's only 4 or 5 coming. And then, 2 of the guys that dropped might be Leo Chenal, or it might be Nick Cross, who was down in the box early in the play. Next thing you know, he's manned up on a tight end up in the middle and things like that. So there's a lot of nuances that we have added to this team to be a much better, much more consistent defense. Realistically, the thing I love about all these players, whether it be Sonny Styles, whether it be Leo Chenal, Nick Cross, all these things, a defense is only as good as the amount of players that are swarming to the ball on every play. The biggest thing that you could talk about for, this team last year was communication on the back end. Outside of that, it was very, very evident that, you have Mikey Sanders still running it down, or you have Frankie Louvu running it down. But if either of them two guys missed it, or Bobby Wagner didn't get it, like if anything got behind those 3 players, it was not consistent enough from the standpoint to where you're going to have a successful defense, man. It's got to be all 11 swarming to the ball. Like, okay, this guy roomed down the line of scrimmage. He might not have made the tackle, but he slowed him down enough for the other 6 guys that are coming behind him and to get him. And that's what this defense is going to look like, and that's what I expect to see from this defense. We have guys that I see constantly pursuing, whether it was Leo Chenal, Nick Cross, and these guys. These guys are constant pursuers to the ball. So it's something that I like, and it's something that, if you watched Joshua Joseph's tape, at Tennessee, it's something that he does have that motor. He will consistently run down ball carriers from the backside if he's coming from the backside in the run game. He holds the edge on his side in the run game. He's going to have to add a couple pounds, I'm sure, and get really nuanced in that, because now he's going to be going against NFL tackles week in and week out. So he's going to have to improve in that department. But the good thing is you don't need that right away. So again, it's very, very nice to have it. I like the players that we've added on defense. I like the players that we've added on offense for the nuances that we're going to start adding and running more traditional sets and things like that, and things that are only going to not necessarily just be good for Jaden long term to be able to develop in those nuances of those games, but they should keep him healthier long term, because realistically now you don't have to run your run game through Jaden Daniels. Now you have Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, you have a Jerome Ford or a Rashad White, or however the running back room pans out, you have guys that consistently get you 3 to 4 to 6 yards every carry, as long as Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt is not putting that ball on the ground like he did as a rookie, which I'm sure a lot of that is nerves. He didn't really have a fumbling issue in college. Some of it to me was, when I went back and looked at his fumbles, a lot of it was just not like Antonio Gibson being a converted wide receiver to running back. You can be taught how to hold the ball, but there's a certain point where you got to know when the play is over and just get down, because realistically, that's what these defenders are trying to do. They're trying to come in and punch that ball out. Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of nerves as a rookie. He wanted to excel. He wanted to show that he belonged, and he definitely did that, especially towards the tail end of the season, where he very, very much took what was available to him and got down. When the play was over, he got down, he stopped fumbling the ball, and that is more of what I expect to see from Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt as we're going to see him move forward in this. And then adding a thumper like Katron Allen. Man, you start wearing a team down with Katron Allen and Jerome Ford, and then bring in Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. Dude, that dude is electric, and it's only another facet of the game that's really, really going to take a lot off of Jaden Daniels. And now Jaden Daniels can just start excelling as a quarterback. And then when the play's not there, down the field, Jaden can torch you with your legs. Why he's not being consistently spied, because realistically, they're not going to be able to do that if that is not a staple in our offense. I'm not going to say they're not going to spy him, but when they are spying him, go traditional. Hand the ball off. Throw the ball out to the running back and just get rid of it. Get rid of it. Don't take the hit. Get rid of it. Let the plays start to stack up, and then they're allocating that to a spy. They're allocating that spy, and then eventually they're going to have to pull that spy because you're beating them other ways. It's a chess game. It's not checkers. The runs will be there for Jaden Daniels as long as he is willing enough to let the players around him excel. That's going to be taking the short pass. It's going to be hitting Antonio Williams for 3 to 6. It's going to be turning around and handing that ball off to Katron Allen and not pulling it, constantly to try to get it there, because you see the end is kind of there, but he's kind of not, like, oh, but I can beat him. Like, Just stop even doing that. Just stop doing that. Every now and then it'll be there and take it. But when it's not there, or it's not, it's half there, it's half, just hand the ball off. Just hand the ball off, get your 4, let your running back take the beating, and then you come back the next play and then throw the damn ball over the linebacker that's cheating down on you the next play. That's how Jaden Daniels is going to excel and improve. And when that facet of his game gets there, I feel sorry for defenses, man, because I have no idea how they're going to defend him. Over my years, man, I've said that a quarterback that can beat you this way from the pocket, that has the legs that Jaden Daniels does, but doesn't solely rely on them, and that's going to be on him to solely not rely on the legs to be that extra marker. When he can start beating these teams consistently from the pocket and then has them legs, and he's keeping himself healthy because he's not continuously running with the legs, and he's taking what's there down the field, these defenses are never going to know how to do it, man. They're never going to be able to consistently stop this dude at all 4 quarters of the game. Eventually, it's just going to break wide open for him. So if Jaden Daniels can be a little bit more nuanced in protecting himself in them nuances and just taking the 3 to 4 yards that are there by handing the ball to the running back, even when the defensive end is kind of crashing down, but he's not all the way down because he's just anticipating Jaden Daniels pulling that ball and running out the backside with it. When he masters that, and then is hitting his wide receivers constantly or the tight end over the middle, and they have to start spreading it out more, that's when he's going to start torching these teams with his legs, and it's not going to be consistent. It's just going to be an extra added bonus to this team, and that's when his run clip is really, really going to skyrocket as far as his yards per carry average, and that's when this offense is going to be really, really lighting it up. So again, it's a lot of projection. It always is this time of year. These are obviously the best case scenario things. You got to stay healthy, man. Like last year, we were riddled by health, but you got younger, you got faster. That was the idea. Can we stay healthy this year? Can we get back to more being in contention than closer to where we were this past season, which is not where I think this roster, when I look at it now, of course there's holes. There's always going to be holes on any NFL roster, and we are still only 3rd year into this developmental, process of drafting and developing players, and the amount of capital that you've traded to, bring in a Laramie Tunsil, who did hit. You lost a draft pick for Deebo Samuel, who's ultimately not here at this point. And then giving the draft capital up for, Marshawn Lattimore, which ultimately didn't work long term. But at the end of the day, you took the gamble because you were in contention. So again, this team is getting better. This team is getting younger, faster, brighter, hungrier. I like the players that they're bringing in. So again, there's a lot of versatility that they have and a lot of options that they can, really, really deploy on the offensive and defensive side of the ball with these additions. I'm very, very excited to see how it plays out for this team this year, man. If David Blau comes out and he's everything that they say he is, and if Durante Jones can hold true to it, be exotic with his, blitz packages and things like that, have guys constantly look, basically same look, different play all the time, man. Like they always talk about with Sean McVay. The same 5 or 6 formations, so many different looks, always the same plays. Always the same plays out of every different formation. It always looks different, but it's the same damn 8 plays all the time. And you don't know what's coming because it all looks the same constantly. If Durante Jones can do the same thing on defense with that, and he starts dictating to offenses what they can and cannot do, or they're constantly gambling, yeah, you're going to give up a deep pass every now and again if you're going to be a blitz-heavy team. But at the end of the day, with everything else that you're going to do, as long as you get that guy down and he doesn't torch you deep, and then you give up 6 on that play, get him on the ground, man, because the next play you're going to get back on the quarterback's ass and, make it back up. 3 points are a lot different than 7, man. So hold the teams to 7, hold the teams to 3, get off the damn field, and stop bleeding yards, man, in the run game. Like, everybody needs to pursue to the ball. Early in the season, we saw it. It definitely tailed off, injury after injury after injury. This year, there's no more excuses, man. You got guys that can get sideline to sideline. They're young and they stay healthy. So, again, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this team. There are still some holes and some deficiencies that are ultimately going to get cleaned up over the next couple off seasons. But, for now, there's a team on paper that can compete. And realistically, with a healthy Jaden Daniels, I expect this team to be everywhere that they, anticipate themselves being. It's a lot on him. The growth is very, very much on him. I know he's working his ass off, man. That's not a dude who it's not a dude who likes to lose. So, I very, very think there's a lot of reasons to be excited as a Commanders fan, man. I really like what they did in this draft, even with a limited number of picks. I'm glad that we have all of our picks going into next offseason's draft. It's a class that I'm really, really liking. I'm currently watching spring games, man. Like I said, I will get my my preseason big board to you, probably my top 50, top 100 very, very soon, man, because I'm watching these spring games, man. There's a lot of really, really exciting college football players to be excited about for next year's class, man, whether it be, Um, more the wide receiver from Oregon, who will be the 2028 class and the cornerback, man. Like Oregon's going to be loaded in that 28 class with Rayola and Moore, and then their corner that's a DMV kid. Blanking on his name right now, but dude, like watching Indiana's, uh, spring game, watching Ohio State spring game. Chris Henry's coming up the pipe from them, and then we all know Jeremiah Smith and things like that. So again, I love this time of year. I'm glad the draft is over. It's very exhausting, kind of double dipping between one year and the next year's class, but this is where I get to hunker down and really focus just between solely for the Commanders and the type of development that they're doing with the players and things like that. And then obviously spring games, college football season starts, and highlighting all of my season outlooks and things like that for those players. Man, this is where all the work starts, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit easier as far as the the 2 months of draft going on for this draft class while you're scouting another. That's how it always goes for me. So again, I appreciate you guys checking out the Blue Chip Podcast, man. This is it's an exciting time, man. No more Dan Snyder. The draft is here. Everybody's 0-0. Everybody's got a shot at the Super Bowl, man. So realistically, we're going to see what this team works their ass off and becomes over the course of this next 9 months, and we'll see where the chips fall. So again, man, from the Blue Chip Podcast, have a blessed week. Stay safe out there, and I'll keep getting this content out to you guys. I really do appreciate the views. Thank you.